If you have two shirts, sell one and buy a sword. If you have two shoes, sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, sell one and buy a sword. Because now is the time for revolution. And the revolution in this period is no longer on streets. Revolution is no longer even on social media. Revolution is in the mind. Peace and power to you, African families, whatever you happen to be. I greet you in the name of peace. I greet you with the greetings of power and peace. And I hope that you have a successful weekend, whatever you happen to be. It's a pleasure to find you here again on our weekly program with ACUP as well as with the Free-Minded Organization. My name is Kabbalah. I'm a member of the Free-Minded Organization and also a member of the African Continental Unity Party. Today I have a very interesting topic that I just want us to discuss quickly, like in 20 minutes of your time. Before I begin, I urge you, please share this video, please like the video, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is the African ACUP, African Continental Unity Party. That can be also your way of participating in this revolutionary movement, is to share this video with your peers, is to invite people to our website so that people can register, is to invite people to our program, because we believe that this is really a time that African people should stand up and should do for themselves what other people pretended to do for them. Let me rephrase myself. This is a time that we as African people should really stand up and do for ourselves what we saw other people pretending to do for us. And that's the only way we can make sure that we are secure. That's the only way we can serve Africa. If we continue to depend on the people who have destroyed us, we are indirectly contributing to our own destruction. However, the topic today is, why do people enter revolution? Why do people engage in revolution? We have seen in the past many revolutionary movements in Africa that did not really bear fruits as they intended before they enter into revolution. And why is this specifically happening? And what is the reason behind the fact that people go into revolution but they don't really produce what they were supposed to produce, what they intended to produce prior to enter revolution? And through this discussion, indeed, I'm willing to discuss some of the aspects of the failure of our past attempt to go into revolution. And obviously through the explanation we can come up with understanding of why people go into revolution, and most importantly, why do we fail in most of our revolution enterprises that or attempts that we have made in the past. And by understanding the factors that have contributed to the failure of our past revolution, we have a chance to succeed in this current revolution or revolutionary movement. We have a chance to succeed with this current revolution if we understand what have made us fail in our past revolution. So the first thing that obviously push people to enter in revolution is to respond to the question of, why do people firstly enter the revolution, is frustration. It's normal for people to enter the revolution because of frustration. In fact, frustration and anger can trigger a revolutionary movement. However, it shouldn't be the leader of the revolution, and we will get to that just in a moment. But the first thing that get people into revolutionary activities is the frustration. And a normal person, a normal African person, when he comes to the knowledge of his history, when he comes to the understanding of his history, the way that he was dehumanized, the way that he was tortured, being branded with iron like animals, being sold and bought like a commodity. If a normal African person, by understanding, by coming to this knowledge, he can have no other feelings except that of frustration. Let me repeat that again. Every normally functioning African person who comes to the knowledge of his history, the way that he was commoditized just like a private property, the way that he was dehumanized, the way that he was branded with iron, the way that he was enslaved, sold and bought as a slave, the way that he was owned by the slave masters. If he comes to the knowledge of this history, he can have no other feelings but frustration and anger. That's very important. And if you don't get frustrated by understanding your history, if you don't get the feelings of the feeling of anger by understanding your history, then you are not a normally functioning African man and African woman. Because when we go through our histories, you just feel like no, because even though it happens to our ancestors, but we feel it in our blood, we feel it in our skins, we feel it in us, and it's really produce anger, frustration, and that feeling of really resistance, or feeling of not willing to see certain things that are happening right now in our communities, and that is normal. And that frustration is what triggers, in most cases, a revolutionary movement, sometimes a protest, sometimes a rebellion, whatever it does triggers in sense of standing against the system, but it's supposed to be functioning like that, because that is how a human being is coded to be functioning. And if you don't have that kind of reaction, then there is something wrong with you. But for most of us, there is a frustration when we understand how we have been dehumanized, and when we realize today in the world how we are systematically being dehumanized, being disempowered, being disenfranchised by the system of white supremacy. It gives us even more and more frustration when you see our fellow African abroad, even in the continent. Being in the continent, we are living in exile, but being in our own motherland. This gives frustration. Now the question is, what do you do with that frustration? Indeed, frustration is a trigger to any protest, any social change. Because even when you study the history of the French Revolution, Russian Revolution, they were all triggered by frustration of the mass population who couldn't just copy with it anymore, who couldn't just really take it any longer. They had to struggle for this social change, for the system to change, and that is very, very important. Is frustration. However, in most cases, when people get frustrated and go into streets to protest or to demand a change, in most cases, people create distraction. They destroy buildings, they destroy infrastructures, they destroy a lot of things that have been there, but they don't build after they've destroyed. And that way comes the problem. And the failure of our post-revolutionary movement is in the fact that we have been led into the revolution by frustration, but not by the vision. You see, there was a time in America where people used to say that we went in the revolution and we came out with the jobs and the revolution died. Let me repeat that again. We went in with the revolution, and then we came out of the revolution with the jobs, and the system and the revolution indeed died. So that's very important. Many of our revolutions or revolutionary movements failed because we went in with the frustration. We were led by frustration. And when you get a response to your frustration, when you get a satisfaction, a temporary satisfaction to your frustration, you automatically step back and abandon the idea of revolution. And that is possible because your revolutionary movement or your revolution was not structured on a vision, it was only triggered and led by the frustration. And that is something that we have to avoid in this period as we are embarking in this new revolutionary movement, the African Continental Unity Party. If we embark in this, because of only frustration, because we feel like Africa is disenfranchised, because we see that our natural resources are exploited and we get nothing out of it, because we see that Africa is overexploited, because we see that we are poor, because we don't have a job, and then therefore we must go into the revolution. What happens, at the moment that you get a job that you didn't have, that triggered you to enter in the revolution? What happened for the moment that you get a job, you get a position? What happened to that? And the revolution will definitely stop. There won't be nothing as revolution, because you get what obviously triggered your frustration. You get what frustrated you. You get a job that you didn't have. You get the money that you didn't have. You got to be upgraded. Maybe you were a working class and now you become a middle class. And then you no longer talk about revolution. You leave the area where you live in, the community where your revolutionary movement started, and now you're living in a suburb, and then there's no more about revolution, and the language change, and you become now politically correct. You now checking how you talk, you checking how you express yourself, and trying to be politically correct, and you no longer talk the language of the masses, because you got the satisfaction to your frustration. And this is the result of many organizations that enter the revolution being led by frustration. That is why I said earlier on that the new revolution is no longer on streets. The new revolution is not even on the social media, but the new revolution now, it's in the mind. Why? Because if you don't understand the structure, the system itself, the world itself, it might be even difficult for you to build a vision of your revolution. There's an author, an American author, African-American author who has wrote a very interesting book, but the most important thing about his book that I want to emphasize is this. He said that if you do not understand the white supremacy, aka racism, what it is and how it works, everything you understand can only confuse you. His name is Mr. Fuller Jr. You can get his book, Fuller Jr. You can get his book. It's a very interesting book. Let me repeat that again. If you don't understand white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything you understand can only confuse you. So what am I trying to say? We are living in the world which is already hierarchically structured in a way that African people have been given a position of subjection under the rule or the authority or the supremacy of white people. Now, our aim as a revolutionary in this moment is to escape, the oppression of white supremacy, is to to go out of the system of white supremacy and establish our own system as African people, a system that is structured on our philosophy of Ubuntu as African people, a system where we don't really have, as we had it in the past. You may remember, if you are knowledgeable of the African history, that we are the only people in the history who did not have in our language a word to call for a jail, because nobody has never went to his neighbor in order to steal from him. There was no word for old people, because people never got to be rejected. There was no word for orphans, because never a child was abandoned. We had a very, very interesting society. So we got to revolutionize the system, which means we have to build another system which is really congruent to our reality as African people, because no matter how we attempt to change or to correct or to improve the white man's system, which is nothing but white supremacy, nothing will change fundamentally, related to our situation in this world as African people. though there is a need for a different system. So that is the vision that we are embarking with in this revolution. So what most of African people always try to do, is to improve their position within the system of white supremacy. Let me rephrase this again. As I said, in the white world, there's a hierarchy. And in the hierarchy of white man's world, white man is the one on top of the hierarchy of the pyramid, and the black people or the other people who are non-white people are those who are now on the bottom under the supremacy of white people. And this automatically, it's injustice, because it creates a lot of chaos, it creates a lot of misfortunes in our society. It creates hunger, frustration, it creates poverty, it creates wars, it creates everything, because as white man believes that he's the one who should be superior. So whenever you have something that white man wants, because he does not want to trade, he does not want to buy, he wants to take everything by force. As the ancestor Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, Africa is still the most richest land in the world. Africa has things that many want and cannot do without, and they have never want to pay for. Therefore, there's always an excuse. They've always found an excuse to invade Africa. I think that I've quoted him correctly. So that is exactly the tendency of white supremacists. It means whenever you have something, all our resources, cannot be traded on the basis of equality and justice. White men will come and create chaos, will create a war in order to take our resources. And today, as we're speaking right now, our families are being owned, or actually progressively becoming a private properties of white supremacists, in a way that they are the ones who design the education system through which our kids go. And in that case, you are being preoccupied to work 2 jobs and 3 jobs in order to feed these kids that you get a chance to be together with only in the evening, in the afternoon, after you have spent the whole day at work. And these kids spending the whole day with white supremacists or in white supremacist institutions, where they are being indoctrinated in the system of white supremacy, where they are being indoctrinated in their inferiority toward the superiority of white supremacy. So that's the reality right now. So our aim in this revolution is not to improve our position in the system of white men. It's not to improve our condition within the system of white men, but is to build a different system, which is an Afrocentric system that will believe that is exactly speaking to our reality, as a system which is speaking to our philosophy of Ubuntu, and is a system actually that has been designed by African people. Because every people who design a system, they design it first of all for their own interest, not for the other people's interest. And the system that we're using today is not just helping us, because the system designed by white men and the system designed for white men. So why do our revolutionary movements fail? It's because of 2 reasons. One is because these revolutions were triggered by frustration and not lured by the vision. It's good for the revolution to be triggered by frustration and anger. That's very important. But it's very imperatively important for a revolution to be led by the vision. In other words, when we attempt to destroy the system of white supremacy, what comes next? We must be able to build a different system. We must be able to build another system. So the problem in the past mostly was that we were quicker to destroy what was there, but we were not ready to build what has to be to supplement or to substitute what we have destroyed. After the Arab Spring Revolution, it seems to be equal to after the Arab Spring Revolution, simply because after the impeachment, or after after getting rid of those dictators who were in power in Arab countries, there was no a proper vision. There was not a proper vision of what kind of institutions we have to build after we have got rid of these dictators. There was no a proper vision of what has to follow after the departure of these dictators. However, there was a vision, not on the African side, who were protesting, who marched on streets of Egypt, who marched on streets of Tunisia, who marched on streets of Libya, but there was a vision only on the side of European who wanted to put some, to put a kind of disorder in those countries so that they can have their hand on the resources of those countries. And it is the reality today with the Libya, where that thing cannot just be called a country anymore, because you don't even know who governed that country. There are a lot of governments there, you see. And it's the same thing that happened with Tunisia. If you look the reality of Tunisian people today, they're still protesting, because even though they got rid of their dictators in what is called Arab Spring, they are still facing a kind of challenge, because there were no vision on the side of the people as to what will happen after the revolution. After we have got rid of the dictators, what are we going to implement? And that's the problem. So that is one of the reasons why our former or previous revolutionary movement have failed, because they were led by not the vision, but only the frustration. The fact that people did not have a job, the fact that people did not have a good position in the works, the fact that people were disenfranchised led them in the revolution, but not the vision of what they want to bring as a systemic change. That's the number one reason. And number two reason is that people were actually not protesting against the system, but they're protesting against the position they held within the system. In other words, people didn't want to change the system. People didn't aim about changing the system. They were aiming about improving their position within the system. And that's the problem. And when you get your position improved, you forget about the revolution, and the revolution died. Exactly. That's what happened. And that is the reason why our movements failed. So today, what we should do is to build a revolution that is not led by the frustration. Of course, we need to be frustrated in order to engage ourselves in the revolutionary movement. And that is, a kind of motivation. Frustration gives you the motivation, but let us not really be inclined too much on frustration, because when I see on the social media, I see that African people are too much talking only about the history, about their emotions, about what white men did, but we don't talk about the way forward. We don't normally talk about the vision that we have as African people of the new system that we have to bring into existence. And that is where our problem lies. But I have a good news for you, fellow African people. There's a very good news for you. We have the African Continental Unity Party. This is a revolutionary movement that is triggered by the frustration of every black man and black woman, of course. But this movement is not led by the frustration. It's led by the vision, and the vision that we have is the vision of the African global power base. We want to build the African global power base, because all our problems, no matter how you express them, no matter how you call them, no matter how you can articulate them, worldwide speaking, all our problems come to one point, which is the lack of power. Africa has resources. Africa has skills. Africa has manpower. Africa has intelligence. Africa has the future. Africa has everything, but Africa has no power to implement the changes that we want to implement. Africa has no power to feed herself. Africa has no power to protect herself. Africa has no power to develop her own economic system. And that is the problem. That is why our vision within the African Continental Unity Party is to build the African global power base. And that is very important. If we manage to build the African global power base here, it will protect and defend all our fellow Africans abroad, around the world. The reason why many Africans today in the world are mistreated is because simply Africa cannot call any people to be accountable for their treatment towards African people around the world. Because what is Africa doing today is still divided, it's still functioning under the colonial structure, it's still functioning under the division or the picture drawn by the European or the white man. Is still disorganized. So there's no a global representation of an entity called Africa. It's every country in its own individuality. But within the African Continental Unity Party, we will be able to break all the divisions among ourselves and to consolidate the image of African people and to build the the global power representation of African people so that we can feed ourselves, so that we can protect ourselves, so that we can defend ourselves, so that we can build our economy, being able to protect and defend that economy, so that we can obviously be represented under the banner of one entity, which is the African Continental Unity Party. So this is the vision that we have, and to achieve that, there are many things that we want to do in order to get that vision implemented. We are focused firstly in the education or re-education, you see, and we are focused on the mobilization and raising of our awareness. We are, focused on the mutual support of African people. So this is the organization that you should be part of if you are really future-minded African men and African women. This is an organization that you should be part of if you really want to see Africa moving forward. If you really think about the future of Africa, this is the organization that you should be part of. And most importantly, if you think of yourself as member of or actually a revolutionary minded, this is the organization that you should be part of. So we encourage you to share this vision with your peers, with your fellow Africans, with your family and your friends. We urge you to support this organization by sharing the vision with other people, and also most importantly by donating and funding to the organization. So by no means we shall find ourselves under the hostage of those organizations that would always want to subsidize the African Revolutionary Organization in order to capture them, in order to divert them from their primacy or from their primary objectives. So fellow Africans, this is the moment that we all should be involved in what Africa has to become tomorrow and after tomorrow. Because what we want Africa to become cannot happen by chance, cannot happen by prayer, cannot happen by hazards. It will happen by what we do as actions today. And there is a popular saying that says that those who want to move the mountain, they don't have to go to prayer. They should begin by moving stone after stone. So we have the mountain of white supremacy standing in front of us right now as African people, and let us begin by removing stone after stone in order to get rid of the objection of white supremacy and obviously build a system that is designed and controlled by us as African people. And we welcome all of you to the African Continental Unity Party in the name of all the team, Brother Kwado, Brother Sabelo, Brother Obioha, Brother Ebugahe, Sister Cynthia, in the name of all the team, Brother Ivo, Brother Ivo, and all the league members of the Free-Minded Organization, as well as the African Continental Unity Party. We welcome you and we thank you for your support, and we urge you to share this video, for example, and share our vision and share our website to people so that people can join the party, and they, as many people, as we come together, our voice will be heard out there, and the impact will begin to be manifest, and we'll be able to implement our vision, which is, or our philosophy of African inclusive democracy, as well as our katikati economy, as the African economic system that we want to bring as an alternative to the current economic system. So thank you very much for your time, and I wish you a successful weekend, and I hope to see you again next week for another very important and constructive conversation. But for now, I say peace and power to you, and then stay strong and take care of yourself. Cheers, bye.